Jonathan, John Michael. Hello, Honor. And any children that might be on Zoom or Facebook with us this morning. How do you love your neighbor? How do you love your neighbor? Well, the answer is that you look for what's best for them. How do you love anyone? Looking for what's best for them. So let me ask you a question. Do people like to be disturbed in the middle of the night when they're fast asleep? No, they do not. So, if you were to go over and knock on your neighbor's door in the middle of the night when they were fast asleep, would you be loving your neighbor if you did that? Yeah. Well, you say no. But what if the house was on fire? Then do you go and bang on the door to wake them up? Or do you think, well, I don't want to disturb them because they're asleep? Who likes to tell bad news? Do you like to give people bad news? Nobody likes to give people bad news. But unless we tell them their house is on fire, the news is dramatically worse, right? We can go over, bang on the door and wake them up, or we can say, I don't want to be somebody who says bad news. And I don't want to wake somebody up in the middle of the night because that would disturb them, and I don't like being waken up in the middle of the night. In fact, I'm hard to wake up in the middle of the night. So, if your neighbor's house is on fire, banging on the door, yelling and screaming, making noise to try and get them out is the right thing to do. Telling them bad news is the right thing to do when they need to hear it. And so, I say this because if we love people, we tell them what they need to hear. We tell people the truth. People don't always want to hear it, but if they need it, we need to tell them that. So I want you guys to pray about this morning. Do you have friends who don't know about Jesus? Would you invite them to something at the church so that they would hear about Jesus? Now that's a difficult question, but guess what? I'm going to challenge the adults on the exact same thing. So, loving people is telling them what they need to hear, even though sometimes it's uncomfortable, and sometimes they might not want to hear it. Right? Okay, so from Matthew 28, verses 18 to 20. And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Now, the Great Commission is given to the church for all time. It wasn't given to the apostles, that they were to go out and do this, and then it stopped them. It was given to the church for all time. In fact, the Great Commission is given to the church for us to do even in the time of a pandemic. We are to go and to make disciples of all nations. Now, there are passive and active ways that churches do this. And we have been leaning on passive ways, but it's time for us to start doing again and looking at how do we do active ways. Now, passive. We're on Facebook and we have Zoom. We've had people join us for Bible study because we're on Facebook. So that's a good thing. But is that enough? And the answer is no. Are electronic relationships enough for people? No. We were made to have interaction with others. In fact, if you talk to pretty much anybody about what the last 18 months has been like, They will tell you that the isolation and the not being able to do this and not being able to do that has been very difficult. For the elderly who are alone to begin with, it's been really hard. The passive is not enough. We need to start thinking about how we're going to be active in ministering to others. Now, we want to be sensible and careful in that. But we need to be doing that. The church is called to be actively at work in the world around us. Now, one of the upcoming events we have is on October 2nd, so less than a week. We're going to do a blessing of the animals. And why a blessing of the animals? Well, really simple, because it's a natural for Ginger and I, because we love animals. We get to know our neighbors. We learn the ones first who have dogs, because they're out walking the dogs, and we learn the name of their dogs. Then if they have kids, we learn the name of their kids. And then sooner or later, we get their names down. You know, we are animal nuts, and so a blessing of the animals is a natural for us. The question is, what is natural for you? You see, people always come up with ideas on how the church ought to be active. You know, we ought to be doing this, and we ought to be doing that, and they may all be great ideas, but do we have anybody to do them? And think about, is that something that you're interested in doing? Because one of the things we need to realize is that if we're going to look at making disciples, that's a long-term commitment. So if we're going to be looking at things that we're going to be doing actively, we need to be thinking about stuff that we can do for the long haul, not the short run. For those of you who are parents, particularly those of you who have adult children, when do you stop being a parent? You don't. My mother still views herself as my mother. I still view her as my mother. Because that's the reality of the relationship. Discipling people is something that is a long haul, something where you build and develop relationships with them. Doing something that we don't have any interest in, that we don't particularly like, is not going to be a way that's going to help us build long-term relationships with people. You will end up resent doing it, and you will end up resent doing them, or you will end up resent them because you're doing it, and it won't work. So we need to think, as we're looking at being active, what are things that are natural to you? What are things that you would be interested in doing? And things that you would invite others to? You know, we can come up with great things at church. We can have these wonderful ideas. Let's start an opera group. I love opera music. Of course, I can't sing a note. And I have no real interest in singing opera because I know I can't sing a note. I only want to sing it by myself or torture my wife. Would be a bad idea. So we need to be thinking about and praying about what are things that you are gifted for and what are things that you are natural for. What are things that you are willing to do that we can invite others to make disciples. To make disciples, we need to be present. We need to be present in their lives. And so I'm encouraging us to be thinking about things that we will be doing, things that you are interested in doing, that you would commit to for a long haul. You know, and it doesn't have to be, when we think of making disciples and things to have at church, the first thing we think of is, well, you know, it's got to be super spiritual. And I'm not dismissing that, but it does not have to be. There are churches that have pipe clubs, cigar clubs. I can tell you there's nothing super spiritual about smoking a pipe or a cigar. But if it's something that you're interested in, that you can invite other people to, that you can then sit down and build a relationship with them, that we can communicate the gospel across that relationship, it becomes spiritual. It doesn't have to be the things we think of as spiritual activities. It has to be things that we can build relationships with our neighbors. And then across those relationships, bring the gospel of Jesus to them. Of course, active means having things going on at the church. That sounds like kind of a no-brainer. But for several weeks, we've been asking for a chair for the hospitality committee. And this is something that we need to do. Hospitality is important. What does your family do for celebration? What do you do when it's somebody's birthday? A lot of families, they go out to dinner to celebrate a birthday. My favorite thing, I will celebrate any birthday as long as I go out to dinner. I don't care if I know who Ralph is. Do I get to go out? Sounds great. Let's celebrate Ralph's birthday. Every day is somebody's birthday, so well, you get the idea. People go out to eat. My mother used to make our favorite dinner. Mine was fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and the only vegetable that I really like is spinach, and so I feel like spinach. And my mother would make that for me every year for my birthday. One year, my parents took me and a couple of my friends out to an all-you-can-eat chicken place. They have fried chicken all-you-can-eat. I was like, this is the best birthday ever. But meals. We celebrate things with meals. Meals are covenantal. Meals bring relationship together. If we're going to be doing things at the church, if we're going to have meals, we need to have a hospitality group to head it up so that we can have them. That's just the reality. And I will say this beforehand, Kathy did not pay me to say this, okay? She did not know I was going to say this. Building and grounds is important. Taking care of the building, having it be ready, having it look nice for people to come in so that we can have guests. We've had a building and grounds committee of one person. We need to think about, do we want to be active in ministering to other people? Do we want to be active in welcoming them in? Do we want to help people grow in the faith? Do we want to help people come to know Jesus? We've got to be ready, if we're going to have activities to invite people to have a place to hold them. You see, it's not a matter of thinking of the right thing, because the right activity will be different for different people. It's a matter of thinking up activities and trying to do things that we are interested in, that we will invite people to, and then doing them. One of the reasons why, again, I'm trying to get us to do stuff is that if we start doing things, we need people to participate in them. So it's all well and good to say that so-and-so is going to start this group, and we're going to invite people to go do that group with, well, no, you would invite your friends to go with you to it. You would be participating in these things so that you would help build relationships. You would yourself build relationships with the people who will come. Making disciples is a team effort. We all think that, what we need is an evangelist who's going to go out there and preach the gospel to people and bring people in. And I've known some phenomenal evangelists in my life, and I am not one of them. But that makes converts, and of course making converts is part of the making disciples process. But making converts is not the same thing as making disciples. Making disciples is a team effort. When Jesus talked about making people fishers of men, we think of fishing the way that we do it now. Me, my pole, out in nature. I used to love fishing when I was younger, particularly in my later teens, because I would go out, I'd take my fishing pole, and I would be by myself out in nature. If I caught something, that was a bonus. But that's not how fishing was done when Jesus talks about being fishers of men. They used nets. They went in teams. They worked together. And there's a couple of illustrations from Scripture in Luke chapter 5 that they got so many fish, the nets began to break. And they all had to come together and bring their boats together to get these nets in. It wasn't a solo activity. It was a group activity. In John chapter 21, they had so many fish in the net that they couldn't bring the net into the boat. And so they drug it ashore. In order to do that, you had to have people rowing and people holding on to the net. I mean, it'd be very hard to bring that thing ashore by yourself, because if you're holding on to the net and you're on with the other one, you're not getting to shore. I guess you row 3 times with the left and then switch and then it doesn't work. It is a team effort. It is a corporate activity. We need to work together for the church to be the church. In order for us to work together, we need to be together. So I want to challenge you this morning to start thinking about things that you would do, that interest you, that you would invite other people to, that we could do that at the church and start inviting people to them and looking to build relationships with those in our community that we can then present the gospel across those relationships. That's our call as a church. That's what we need to be doing. How are we reaching the world around us? What will we do? And are we willing to participate in the team effort of making converts and making disciples? That we at Emmanuel would be fishers of men. Let us pray.